It sucks when you see a young player have so much potential to grow, and yet they just don't. They hit an obstacle and can't get over the hump. They can't make the next jump from being a good player to a great player, or a great player to an all-star. We see it all the time, and in recent years, there's been no shortage of these kind of players. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today let's talk about 5 young NBA players who hit a massive wall, and why they're not progressing any further. Without further ado, let's begin. Rui Hachimura. Remember when Rui first got drafted? There was a crazy amount of hype. Besides the fact that he's the first ever player from Japan to be drafted in the first round, he also came in with a playstyle that looked very mature and polished. His offensive repertoire was extensive, and the way he scored, the way he played, he looked effortless. Some folks called him the next Melo. And you know what? I could see it. Offensively, he had the pull-up game, he had the post-up turnarounds, the silky smooth jump shot, a similar build, and the low-key athleticism. Heck, even defensively, he reminded people of Melo. In his rookie season, Hachimura was statistically one of the worst defenders in the league, recording a 116.7 defensive rating. Out of all power forwards or small forwards who played at least 40 games that season, Hachimura had the worst defensive rating among all of them. However, just pure offensively, his potential had no limits. But over the years, his career stagnated just as quickly as he came into prominence. His sophomore season was decent, but he had some injuries that set him back. Then in his third season, that was when he disappeared mysteriously for half the season. Hachimura said there were some personal issues he had to deal with, and he admitted he was burnt out from playing basketball, as he played for the Japanese national team, then came back to the States right when the NBA season started. He needed a break, so he wasn't practicing with the team for months. Hachimura eventually returned to the NBA court in January, but he had to ease himself back into the lineup. Fast forward to now, and he just hasn't progressed in a way the Wizards wanted to see. Now, Rui is coming off the bench, and the team has an incredibly deep rotation at the wings. Deni Avdija, Corey Kispert, Will Barton, Kyle Kuzma, they got a lot of players fighting for minutes, and sadly, Rui is no longer a priority. He went from being a designated starter, playing 30+ minutes a game, to coming off the bench and playing like 22 to 24 minutes a game. His minutes are not consistent at all either. If he's having a bad shooting night, he would just get benched early, and if he's having a good game, he plays more. It doesn't help that he hasn't improved much since his rookie year, but to be fair, he doesn't have much opportunity to show it either. It doesn't look like he's part of the team's future plans anymore. RJ Barrett. Barrett's career arc has been somewhat similar to Rui's, in the sense that he showed a lot of promise in his first few seasons, but recently he stagnated. In fact, it's even worse for Barrett because he was the 3rd overall pick of his class, a guy who was once touted as the #1 prospect in the nation. The expectations are much higher than Rui's, and he has not lived up to it. After his sophomore season, he made steady progress. In particular, his 3-point shot saw a major improvement. It was the first and thus far only time in his career where he shot above 40% from 3. But since then, he regressed heavily, and overall, his shooting is getting worse and worse. Out of all players taking at least 16 shots a game, Barrett currently has the worst true shooting percentage, at 49.7%. His efficiency is even worse than Dillon Brooks right now, who's at 50.1%, and Brooks is like the poster child for bad efficiency. There's a myriad of reasons for his lack of success. The Knicks as a team have like no spacing. They're literally the worst 3-point shooting team in the league, hitting just 31.6% of their threes. Every time RJ drives into the paint, he's met with a hand in his face. Defenders are getting to him so easily because they can just ignore the other shooters. This is a huge deal because over half his total shots come within 10 feet of the basket. Yet his percentage from that distance is not great for a guy who shoots that many close shots. The funny thing is, you can point to a lot of young players and say, wow, that guy is shooting poorly because he's taking bad shots. But for Barrett, the shots he takes are not inherently bad. He's going full Murray ball. A whopping 96% of his total attempts come from the 3-point line or within 10 feet of the rim. Those are supposedly the best shots to take, so he's not wrong in taking them. The issue is, he's too predictable. The Knicks' offense is too predictable, so he sees a close defender on every shot he takes. Nowadays, I know NBA teams think long twos are basically the plague, but he could do well if he took a bit more of them, like he did earlier in his career, just to make the defense respect his jumper. I mean, he should be willing to try anything at this point. Isaac Okoro. Okoro wasn't really considered a top-tier prospect until he got to college, where he showcased his skills quite well at Auburn. It was enough to the point where he got drafted with the 5th pick by the Cavs. At that stage, the Cavs were just starting to rebuild, and getting Okoro was a nice start. In his first 2 seasons, he averaged about 30 minutes a game, and occasionally showed some flashes of potential. The issue was, he never got that many touches. He came in as a great defender, a good rim runner, a guy who scores from slashing and cutting to the basket. But that's basically all he could do. Offensively, he was quite limited, but there was still room for him to grow. And on a team like the Cavs with a bunch of young players, they were supposed to develop together. However, his peers progressed much faster than he did. And now in his 3rd season, he got relegated to the bench. The truth is, the Cavs don't have much time to waste anymore. They're not going to be patient with Okoro if they don't need to be. In a short span of time, they went from bottom dwellers to being a legitimate contender. Now, Okoro's defense is still as suffocating as ever. That's the one saving grace of his game, and that's why he doesn't need many touches to impact the game. However, he's still an offensive liability. He still can't shoot threes, and defenses just ignore him half the time. As a result, he has one of the worst offensive box plus minuses in the league at a negative 5.2. I guess, on the bright side, the Cavs have enough offensive firepower that they don't need him to score. Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland got that covered, and plus, I'd rather let them have the ball than Okoro. Marvin Bagley. The thing with Bagley is that the fact that he was drafted right before Luka Doncic, he's always going to be relevant. We're always going to talk about him, we're always going to observe and follow his career, and we'll never forget about him. The same deal with Sam Bowie, the guy drafted right before MJ. No one would even care about him otherwise. For Bagley, his career has been a roller coaster, to say the least. From injuries to getting traded to Detroit, Bagley has been resilient, despite all the critics screaming in his ear. On the Pistons, he's been doing quite well and carved out a niche for himself, but he's still only playing around 24 minutes a night. He still doesn't have that bigger role that he desired when he came to Detroit. He's now taking the fewest shots per game of his career. He's a core part of the offense, but he's not a focal point, which might be a good thing. I think the Kings were trying too hard to make him into the focal point, which he clearly is not capable of, as we know now. Also, another thing is, Bagley has yet to play for a winning team in his 5 seasons in the NBA thus far. That eventually drains you mentally, being part of losing teams who are constantly tanking. There is a bright side though, he's actually outplaying his contract. His 3-year, $37 million deal is a bargain, considering his production has been quite good. It also makes him easier to trade, if the Pistons want to go down that route. Still, at this point, the hopes of him ever becoming an all-star are withering away. Perhaps he's destined to be a role player, and there's nothing wrong with that. Deandre Ayton. Oh boy, I might get some flack for this, but let's be real, Ayton has been the same player for years now. He really did not change at all since coming into the NBA, and the numbers reflect that too. However, because he's on the Suns and they've actually been winning, there's no pressure on him to individually excel. Remember his whole contract debacle over the offseason? The Suns did not offer him the 5-year max that he wanted, which made sense because he wasn't worth that much. Instead, he was a restricted free agent, and the Suns told him to go out there and get any contract you desire. So, Ayton signed a deal with the Pacers for 4 years, $133 million, which the Suns immediately matched to keep him. Through the years, Ayton's place in the organization has been polarizing. There have been times in the playoffs where he'd get benched towards the end of the game, which he obviously disagreed with. In fact, he didn't speak to Coach Monty at all from the end of Game 7 until training camp this season. During the contract signing over the summer, Ayton threw numerous questions at the Suns brass, asking what the team expects out of him, or what his role should be. Does he want to maintain the status quo? Does he want to keep taking the same number of shots as Cameron Payne? I mean, that's ridiculous if you think about it. If he was on a losing team, he'd be more impatient and want more touches and be a bigger focus on offense. But like I said, because the Suns are a contender, he doesn't need to demand anything, and people are okay with him maintaining his play as long as they win. If he had more touches though, I think he'd easily become an All-Star or All-NBA caliber player. As of now, those accolades have to wait, as the Suns push for another chance at a title. Anyway, those were 5 young NBA players who hit a massive wall. Do you foresee any of these guys breaking through and making the jump to the next level? Or is this who they are? Will they remain like this for the rest of their careers? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.